everyone, to E-commerce Straight Talk. We are honored to have David Katz as our guest here. Are you a big college football fan?
Yeah, more pro sports, but definitely college.
Well, who's your team?
I have to go with University of Minnesota.
Hey, I watched that game last night.
Yeah. It's a rough injury.
And oh man, yeah, because that was good. You always love a fist fight, especially because my Oregon Ducks are playing next week.
Oh yeah. That's gonna be big.
So I wanted to see what all the fuss is about. But anyway, so David here is the CEO and founder of Swaggr. So these are socks made out of recycled plastic, right, David?
Yes, that's correct.
Awesome. So tell me a little bit more about how you got started in this and what sort of where the concept came from.
Yeah. So originally, the idea behind it was, personally, I've always been a huge sock fan. Whether it's been crazy, funky dress socks, any cool, fun, exciting sock, if you can call it exciting. That's kind of, I loved it. So my wife Katie and I we're both really active, like to be outside. And so, we're obviously, we were getting holes in our socks. They weren't fitting right. And it's super frustrating. And so we decided that, you know what, let's do it better. I already had an affinity for socks. We're both really active. So we figured the athletic sock arena would just be the right fit for us. And so from the beginning, we both knew that we wanted it to be sustainable. We wanted it to be, the environmental aspect needed to be at the forefront of it. We both grew up that way. My dad owned a couple of businesses in the recycling industry. Katie's family was always very recycling conscious growing up. And so that we knew was just going to be part of it. And so kind of started our journey there, and we kicked it off with a Indigogo crowdfunding campaign.
Awesome. Yeah. And so that Indigogo campaign, that's really what set you guys up rocking and rolling, right?
Totally. Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm curious to sort of the process that went into that. I know there's a lot that has to go into these campaigns. There's so many brands and so many companies and so many products and people that just throw something up there on Indiegogo or Kickstarter without being fully prepared and have a full plan of attack in place. So what was your guys' process in sort of developing that?
Yeah, totally. And to your point, there's so many companies, crowdfunding has become like a really great platform to launch your business, so that it's flooded with products. So you really need to be smart in how you approach it. You need to be organized. And so for us, it started about 3 to 6 months before we actually launched. We started our planning. So it's not, see what sticks, put it up there, and, cross your fingers and let's hope it works. But there's a lot of planning that goes into it. So, it starts with, you need to make sure that you're getting the information out there so that the public's aware of it. And by doing that, you start, at least with us, what we were instructed was you start with a core group of people, close family and friends, whoever they are, 5 to 10 people who can take the information whenever you need them to send it out. If it's once every hour, once daily, blast it out. And that's an everyday process. And you just sort of expound on that. And there are a bunch of different channels that out, social media, all sorts of stuff. It's a super, it's not complicated, but it's definitely involved. And if you want to have a successful campaign, you've got to prepare for it.
Awesome. And so how did that, once you guys launched, what was your goal, and sort of how long did it take you to meet that goal?
So the goal is 20,000, and you can set different parameters for how long you want the campaign to run. We ran it for 30 days. And what's super important is a big first step. That's what we were told that's what we were planning for. Because if you have a first day, it puts you on whatever platform, Kickstarter, Indiegogo, whoever it is, puts you on the list, puts you in their emails that out saying, hey, new campaigns that are exciting and doing well, which can really throw your name out there and get you some more backing. But goal was 20,000. In the first day, I think we did about eight to $10,000 in the first day.
Wow.
That was a huge push, and it allowed us to really, get that organic push into Indiegogo's trend. So we were trending for a few days, and then things cooled off, which we were expecting them to. And then we hit our goal probably about 15 to 20 days in. We hit our goal. And then from there, we set up some stretch goals to see if, what we could do, but we were so pumped up that we hit it that it was just super exciting.
No, I mean, that is exciting. I think too, what's so interesting is, with crowdfunding and the availability of it, it's such an easier and simpler way of testing the market, right? Does the market actually want said product? So it's an easy way of testing it. So that's why I think those platforms are so valuable. And crazy enough, even big corporations still use those platforms to test products and see what works and see what doesn't.
I mean, I think that, and that's a great point. There are a couple of big brands that use that when they come out with new products, just to see if get the social proof for it. So that's a really great thing that it allows you to do, to see if the market is really interested in what you're providing. But on top of that, it's a really great way, especially if you don't have a lot of capital up front, to go out and get the initial capital you need to do a first production, or however you want to use that money to keep the business moving forward. So that's another aspect, I think, of crowdfunding that's so valuable, because starting a business is not easy. And when you add in the capital aspect of it, it makes it even that much more difficult. So it's a huge thing when you can, leverage a platform to generate some money for you.
Well, and I think for you guys as well, it also helped really create that community, or at least starting off and building that community, which is
absolutely
obviously so important in 2021. It's like, I think we've talked to other folks in this year about the same thing. It's like, with everything going on in the world, with all the iOS changes, with just everything, brand and community are so much more important now than ever. They always have been, but people haven't relied on it a lot, right?
Right.
And so I think moving forward, like that's really where you have to go. And so being able to utilize platforms like Indiegogo and start helping build that community and really get it off the ground is genius.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Appreciate that. And it's true. I mean, it's funny, if you look at even 20 years ago, 10 years ago, business is so different today than it was back then. Like, to your point, you really have to be able to, you have to be an expert, but you really have to be able to leverage the internet and the platforms associated with the internet to really launch your brand and to really engage with your audience, because it's not just let's go out and shake hands and have face-to-face meetings anymore and always do direct mailers, or it's just a different approach now than it ever has been.
Cool. And then I am curious, so you have the idea, the concept, you sort of prove it out, prove that the marketplace wants it, you run Indiegogo, you start building that community. Sort of what were the next steps involved in your guys' process? Because I know you guys ended up getting into retail pretty deep there. So what was the process of you sort of moving and growing? So
the next step was actually going out and selling. We hadn't sold anything to the public when we launched that campaign, and that campaign was pure to be able to get the money to actually start manufacturing and selling. So next step for us was, to your point, was trying to organically build our brand. And so what we started doing, our next step was we started selling at farmers markets all throughout Houston. And the beauty of Houston is it's so large that there were, in 1 month, not that we could hit this many, but there were 70 different markets going on weekends throughout 1 month in Houston. And so
it's crazy.
So it's crazy. Yeah. But what we set up a table. Brought our socks, and we just started selling them to farmers markets. And it was unique because, we're not your typical farmers type company.
Yeah.
And so it was awesome. I mean, it allowed us to really understand our customers, have some face interaction, really grow an awesome loyalty. We've got such great brand loyalty in Houston, from those farmers markets. And because there was such a great reception and the brand awareness was growing there, I started hiring about 8 people to do markets a weekend, so that we could just start hitting up in addition to what I was doing. So we could just start hitting up as many markets as we could just to get the word out.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. So that's, no, I mean, that's pretty cool. That's like the I don't want to say old school, but not a lot of people do that anymore, right?
Right.
And then
right.
not only that, like you're saying, like start hiring other people to go. So you're sort of scaling your ability to reach even the local community. Obviously, you're Houston, so Houston's ginormous.
Yeah.
So you got kind of lucky with the location there.
Oh yeah.
But no, I find that fascinating and amazing. And I'm not too sure how many companies these days actually do that. So it's very interesting. And not only that, but this continues the conversation about building community, right? So started with Indigogo, building that community through there, building that brand awareness and product awareness too, because product is so important. And then continuing that community building, which is, like I said, so very important. Now, going from farmers markets, then you guys got into retail.
Yeah.
So tell me sort of that process and how you were able to really leverage retail.
Yeah, so we knew, I mean, the natural progression for us, and we knew farmers markets they're great. They're great for, getting your brand out there and for people to start get to know you. But if we want to start scaling, we knew that our next step was retail and obviously the online portion. But for retail, initially, my wife Katie and I, we made a list of all of the retailers we wanted to get into. And I got on I grabbed my phone and I just started calling every single one of them on the list. And I would call them again and again and again until I actually would get someone, or eventually until they said yes, or until I could send out samples. And that's how it happened for the first, I don't know, maybe 6 months of retail was just me on the phones, calling places locally, calling places nationally, sending out samples, dropping samples off anywhere I could, whether they had a tiny little strip mall shop in rural, Conroe, Texas, or whether it was, Dick's Sporting Goods. It didn't matter to me. I knew we needed to get there, and so I just started calling, and that was initially how we started doing it. But I think to leverage the powerful machine that retail is, to really get into the big ones, to really scale through retail, we actually hired an agency to help us really kind of make our waves in there.
Interesting. Yeah. And obviously agencies, me owning one, it's not cheap, right? But the ability to scale is always there. So it's just one of those things that you sort of, once you hit a certain level, you kind of have to go into.
Yeah.
Now,
absolutely. I mean, and the bigger ones, the bigger retailers you get into, if we're talking specific retail, it's hard. I mean, they're hard to break into. It's hard to find the right buyer that you need to speak with. And so, leveraging an agency, although, the cost can be high, the value they bring to the table definitely outweighs that.
Awesome. And would you suggest, or if you were giving advice to somebody else who was thinking about getting into retail or just getting into retail, would you advise them to go that route or to stick to the grind?
I'd tell them to start by sticking to the grind, because unless you've got big capital backing, or you've had a lot of success and the cash flow is already coming in, but you have to have the budget for it, because it's expensive, and especially with retail, you're really not going to see results from your efforts. And the agencies will tell you this too, for 3 to 4 months. And so you really need to be able to have the budget for at least 3 months, and probably 6 months, just to make sure it's actually going to be worth your while and stick it out long term. So I definitely say kind of hit the grind, make your lists, call, and then once you start to get some traction, reach out to the agencies, because it's going to be easier for them to also get you into larger retailers if you've got somewhat of an understanding of how it works, and you also have some relationships already established. Gives you a little more credibility.
Makes sense. And I am curious to learn a little bit more about retail, especially when, we're talking about farmers markets and you're able to talk to the customer right then and there, or anyone, and just get a feedback, right?
Yeah.
One-on-one. How was that different with retail and working with retail stores? Would they give you feedback on products or suggestions, or say, hey, you know what, we'd like more of this kind of product, or could you make XYZ?
Yeah. So when it got to the point where they were interested in at least reviewing samples, they would tell us what style they were interested in, and we'd send those types of samples. And initially, when we were kind of pitching to retailers, we just throw everything that we had and say, hey, here's the styles we have, kind of new styles for summer or whatever it is, whatever season it is, and then they'll come back that they're interested or not. And if they are, then they'll kind of want to focus on a specific segment. But once they agree and you start into the process of onboarding and you're starting to put in your assortment into their system, again, I mean, you can put in anything you want. I really think even the styles that they're preferring to have, they're willing to test other things if it's something that's somewhat in their wheelhouse. So that's not too much of something that we needed to worry as much about.
And what about your design process? I've always been sort of fascinated by this, because I'm a huge fan of socks.
Yeah.
Especially when you're wearing a suit, the socks and the watch are the thing that sort of set you apart, because you're not going to wear a super flamboyant suit. At least I'm not, right?
Yeah, right.
So you get some socks that sort of represent your personality. So I'm curious into like what goes into the design of socks. You guys just come up with something like, hey, you know what, you had jalapenos one night, we're gonna throw jalapenos on the socks, or like where does the inspiration come from?
So it's interesting with our socks. So our socks are made out of recycled plastic bottles. They're 91% made out of recycled plastic bottles, and so with that, because of the large amount of recycled materials that we have, the innate knitting designs that you'll see on a lot of other socks, like throwing jalapenos on there or pizzas or whatever it is, we're a little bit limited in the craziness of our designs. And so kind of our inspiration has been, ocean, clean, simple. The yarn we use and how we kind of manipulate our yarn, it's really cool because you have sort of this heathered speckled look to every one of our socks. And so we really go for that simplistic, clean look. And so, we've done some leopard designs or zebra designs for a zoo that we were working with. But for the most part, we've got lots of really cool colors, but the designs are pretty simple. We don't get too crazy with them. Occasionally we'll get a business who wants to do some customizing, and they'll reach out and we'll put, switch it up and put their logo and do some stuff for them. But for the most part, we stick to our branding. We love the branding, and we've got our sea lion logo, and kind of stick to our speckled colors and our sea lion logos, and kind of go with that.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm sure if you put me in charge of design, you'd be like, Sam, what are you doing, man? This is not going to work with anybody.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I mean, there are definitely ways, like, I think a lot of people, and I'm totally agreement with you too. Like, I love wearing crazy socks with suits. That's kind of initially how we had come up with this. It's just because it's fun to wear. It's a fashion statement now, right? Like socks have to become a fashion statement. It's not just like you're wearing a black suit, get some black socks. Like it's just not how it is anymore.
Well, I think for men in the professional world, right? So suits are still, and obviously the fashions change with suits, but small changes, right? Not huge changes. Right. And I think when you're wearing a suit, there are some people out there who want to make a statement, but most people wearing a suit don't.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the way that you sort of show off your personality or make a statement, like I said, it's either with a watch or socks. Obviously, you can throw a tie in there, but ties, you sort of want to take it safe with ties. And cufflinks too, if you're wearing a shirt that requires cufflinks, right?
Yeah.
But most of the time you're not. So the socks are everything. Right?
Socks are, it really, it shows your personality. And so, our kind of idea around that is we've got lots of really cool, vibrant colors. We've got the whites and the grays and the blacks, but we've got some really cool, like bright colors that are pretty awesome. And so, we're just getting to the point now. We're going to be kicking off, October's coming up. We're going to try and do some really cool new designs for Breast Cancer Awareness Month and all that kind of thing. So we've got our cool designs, and they're going to be coming, but they're not as we don't put pizzas or anything like that on there quite yet.
I gotcha. Okay. And so we talked about inception and launch and sort of growth, talked about retail. So now to step sort of in the direct to consumer realm. Let me talk a little bit more about that and what platforms have you guys been utilizing? How have you really sort of taken the next step in going direct to consumer?
Yeah. So initially we built out our site on WooCommerce. Not to get too technical, but I figured I'd start there because we made some changes in that regard too. And so it was a great platform for us initially to start. We were familiar with it, but as we started to grow, and initially it was organic, we did a lot of foundational stuff in terms of SEO. We were making sure that we're doing blogs, we're doing stuff that's going to organically drive traffic to our site, because in our opinion, take a step back. I did this little conference challenge course probably about a couple weeks ago, and there's a quote in there that I thought was interesting. It said, "You're not a business that's going to scale until you can actually grow through paid strategy." And I thought that was really interesting, and I totally think that's valid, because I think that you can scale hugely through there. But for us initially, we wanted to at least lay the foundation for organic, so that we've got that traffic always coming through, regardless of if we've got ads going or how the paid stuff is going. And so as we started growing, we switched over to Shopify, just because from an e-commerce retail standpoint, the bells and whistles, such integration features and are so easy to use. And so once we did that, that's kind of when we really started to focus a little bit on our paid strategy, because Facebook and Instagram, just starting to do stuff with TikTok, integrates so well with Shopify in terms of tracking. It's seamless. And so we started that strategy, and we're primarily focusing on Facebook and Instagram, and dabbling a little bit with TikTok.
Interesting. Yeah. And I literally had this conversation yesterday with my brother-in-law who runs an e-commerce business. And, we were discussing platforms and Facebook and also looking at the data too, and how people are utilizing these platforms. And it's interesting how Facebook still holds the majority of attention, but it's all older attention, right? People over the age of 35. Yes. You have Snapchat, which reaches an insanely amount of young people here in the US under 24. I think about 75% of people 13 to 24 is what Snapchat reaches, which is insane. But how they use that platform is not so much social, it's more messaging, right? It's more of a messaging platform. And then you have TikTok, which I think they came out with the numbers, and the average TikTok user, and I don't know how accurate this is, watches 8 hours a day of TikTok, which seems like a lot, but like at the same time, you're like, yeah, no, it's ridiculous. Yeah.
Yeah. It's scary. You just like get lost in it and you realize like an hour's gone by.
or the whole day. Yeah.
or the whole day.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, I don't know, my For You page is just all funny, stupid stuff. Like that's it. It's totally different than my wife's is all animals and stories that'll make you cry, and mine is just people doing dumb things or saying dumb things. It's great. But yeah, no, I think in our experience so far with the brands that we've got onto TikTok has been, it sort of reminds me of Facebook, Instagram circa 2015, 2016, where gimmicky stuff works really well for some odd reason. If you're going for sales, that's what we're talking. But for overall brand awareness and how, a lot of larger companies use it, perfect. But if you're going for sales, it's just not a converting mechanism, right? And like I said, this reminds me of 2016 Instagram. We had the same thing. We could get a lot of engagement on Instagram, but getting sales was very tough. Yes. And I think throughout that year, 2016, 2017, and then finally in 2018 is when Instagram really started converting well for us. Now, that phenomenon, I think, not only is it the fact and people are trusting, spending their dollars online through e-commerce, which the pandemic has really helped push, but that the older audience is there because the older audience has buying power, right?
Yeah, totally.
And so I think with TikTok, they're getting there slowly but surely. I'm only 35. I'm on there, and but like I'm part of the older group on TikTok, right? It's like so many people like under the age of 20 on there.
Right. Totally.
So, but yeah, no, I think TikTok's like one of those platforms, like you got to get in it now. And like, now's the time. I remember, we all said this back when Facebook really started hitting it and no one listened. Instagram started hitting and no one listened. LinkedIn, that's a whole other story. I feel like Microsoft just needs to hire me to fix the ad side of their platform because it's worth $1 billion. I just don't know how to do it. But more specifically with paid, and then sort of that ecosystem of paid and organic community building. I guess what you're saying is that's really how you guys have been able to push more direct to consumer. And so what would you say is sort of the ratio to from retail to direct to consumer? What you guys are sort of aiming for?
So I would say in terms of, I mean, our goal, honestly, I would love to do 100% online and no retail. I mean, that would be my preference. I really like retail. I think it's a really great strategy. And I think there are totally huge benefits for it. But the margins in retail are a lot less, just because it's the cost of doing business with retailers. Mm-hmm. And so if in an ideal world, we do 100% online. But right now I'd say it's probably 70-30 online to retail. And so it's a good mix. There are the benefits to retail is you get those POs and you get the capital big chunks, and it allows you to do stuff right away with how you're going to manage that. But online paid strategies, it's huge, and it's such a great way to scale, but you have to be careful with it because it's, if you don't do it right, and it's hard, it takes time. If it's not done right, and this, with doing what you do, if you don't do it right, you can lose a lot of money really quickly.
Yeah, I think how I like to look at it is, when you go to an agency or someone like myself, I really hate using the word agency. It sort of has this negative connotation here in 2021, right? It can mean so many things, but in reality, when you look at marketing, advertising, media buying, all this stuff, it's all we're really doing is amplifying, right? I've talked to so many people over the years that think like they can sort of just hand over their whole business. And it's like, that doesn't work. It doesn't work like that. No. Basically what's going to happen is you got a little introduction to the market. The market said, hey, they want your product. You're trying to scale. We're going to help you amplify that. And we're going to tell you if the market really wants you to scale or not. And we'll be able to tell real quick whether it's going to fail or be a complete success. That's all we're doing. And you're throwing money at it so you can learn your lesson quicker, right? Yeah. That's essentially what you're trying to do. Exactly. And then from there, you run your tests, you do your things that you need to do to really get into it. But it is impossible to push something the market doesn't want. I don't care how much money you have, it is impossible. And I've seen it. I've seen people will spend $250,000 in 3 months trying to push a product. Maybe they get one sale. That's it. So it's very interesting how people sort of see that. Now, I'm curious, I sort of have a reputation on this show to bash Amazon quite a bit. But I'm curious, have you guys had any success? Have you tried the platform yet?
Yeah, we've tried the platform. We're on the platform. Ironically, so we started on the platform probably about 6-8 months ago, and we hadn't really done much with it. Everybody was telling us we should get on it. So we went on it, and we started running some ads, and we actually had hired somebody just an individual, to run them for us, and they didn't go well. And so we kind of we put it on hold, and we're on there, and we get sales from it, but it's definitely not a focus of ours, and so it's something that we do utilize, but not on a grand scale.
Okay, I'm totally cool with that. The reason being is obviously that I sort of say, like, if you have a product that's worthwhile, don't ever throw it on Amazon, because Amazon will just hijack that immediately. It's what they do. And not only that, but they own the customer and you don't. It's like such a problem.
That's again, that's when it comes to Amazon or it comes to retail, that's that is definitely another aspect of it.
And I'm going to sort of put you on the spot here, because I know last time we talked, I never brought this up, but if you could go, like, if someone was starting off new and they were about to start a brand or an e-commerce company, or they just had an idea of a product that they really wanted to shoot for the moon, what would be like one lesson that you've learned, or any piece of advice that you would give that individual?
Yes, I would say start on Shopify right away. We didn't. And we didn't pay a huge amount for, we were just starting out. We spent about $6,000 on our website. And, looking back, when we transitioned to Shopify, we did our own Shopify site, and we did the design. We had a little bit of work from our developer, but it was seamless and much better. And it's so much more integrated. And I'd say right out of the get-go, start with Shopify. I wouldn't, that's one thing, because I think for e-commerce, I just think, at least for apparel stuff, everything in Shopify works really well and seamless with email marketing, Facebook, TikTok, because some of the platforms don't integrate with TikTok. So that's one thing is, I would say, is get on that Shopify train right away. And two is, make sure you are understanding your customer. So, if you can do some form of community outreach, whether it's farmers markets, or something else, dive into that right away. Get your product in the hands and ask them why they like it and what they don't like about it. And ask them to compare it to the products that they love that are similar. I think those are the three biggest things. I would say from the get-go is just, if you're going to do a website, in my opinion, obviously it's just my opinion, I think Shopify would be great if you're going back and forth. And don't think so much. Just
Yeah.
do it. Just do it. So, it's a lot of things are overwhelming. And I tell myself every day, do one thing that's going to keep the business moving forward. All right. Because you can get stuck in a lot of stuff. So when you start out, if you can do one thing each day that's going to progress the business that much further, do that.
That's solid advice. That's great advice. I think to sort of add to that, this idea of perfection or having it perfect, right, is in everyone's mind. And it's like starting, being successful in business. You don't have to be the smartest person, right? You really don't. In fact, no. I'm sure anyone listening knows somebody who runs a successful business, and they would consider them a total moron. So,
right.
So proof's in the pudding there. So it's like one of those things where, everyone waits for the perfect time. And then with that too, I've sort of come up with a new mantra as of last month. An ego is not your amigo, right? Like
I love it.
Doing things because you've seen that's how someone else did it. Or doesn't mean that you have to do it that way, right? And you could take the Bob Ross approach, right? This is your world, this is your tree, happy little accidents, and just go about it that way. Otherwise, it can be soul crushing and just
yes, totally
never ending,
and you just nothing's ever going to be perfect, especially when you have this huge day of success. You're going to be like, oh, I finally figured it out. And then the next day is just going to kick you, and you're going to, want to curl up in a ball in the corner.
Yeah, it's bipolar living. It's one day you think you've got it all figured out. You're like, oh, great. And then by Wednesday, you're like, I need to go find a new job somewhere, obviously, because this isn't going to work. Yeah,
right, exactly. Totally.
Just getting to the point where you're comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Like if you can get to that point, like, you're golden.
Yeah. And it's perseverance. I mean, and my wife and I, we talked about this, you grind you're always grinding, right? But the grinding it becomes different as you start to gain traction. But, especially starting out, you've got to push. And when you feel you're at a breaking point, you push a little bit harder and you get over that hump. That's the difference, between making it and being successful and not. And I feel like that's why you see a lot of startups, what is the percentage? 80% of all businesses fail within the first 5 years. And it's not that anybody is smarter than anybody else, but it's just the level that you're able to push through the hard stuff and keep pushing when you're down. That separates the successes from the failures.
Absolutely. And on top of that, only 60%, or excuse me, a little more than 60% of business owners in the US make $60,000 or less. So if you think about it like that too, it's like, the level of success out there is so broad. And so it's kind of hard because you're constantly getting on yourself. Hey, we need to do this. There's always more to do. Right.
Totally.
And then over the long haul, you figure out how to be more efficient at the things you do.
Yeah.
And prioritize better. This is the most important thing. If I don't get this done today, the world's going to explode. The rest of it I can sort of push off,
Yeah.
So it's a very interesting life running a business, especially here in this digital age.
Yes.
So I appreciate you coming on and talking to us, David. How can people find you? Reach out?
Website is Swaggr.com, and it's SWAGGR. There's no E in there. Socks are all up there. You can shoot us an email at hello@GetSwagger to reach out. We're on Instagram, Facebook. It's Get Swaggr is how you get us there. And love just to talk about anything. You have any questions, you just want to say hello. But check out the socks. They're awesome. Sustainable, all made in the US. It's a big focus of ours. Appreciate you having me on. This has been great, Sam.
Awesome, Dave. Hey, it was great talking to you. Everyone else, be sure to follow us on YouTube, and you can also find us in Spotify, Apple, and Google Play. So go ahead and continue to give us a follow and listen in. All right, David.
Cool.
Everyone will take it easy.
Later.